Alright guys, today we're going to be looking at sections 1.3 and 1.4. We're going to be looking at inverse, exponential, log functions, and transversal functions, which are the trig functions. So I'm going to go through the textbook and just kind of point out some of the highlights that you want to review so that it will help you as you go through Cal 1. So first, exponential function. Okay, remember you have a base raised to a power. And they have some of the general forms over here to the left. You have some images of what the graph looks like, and then you also have properties of exponential functions. So you do want to be familiar about the domain and range and some of the limitations when you're looking to graph them. Okay, so you have a natural exponential function, and then we go into looking at inverse functions. Okay, and they do a pretty good job of explaining inverse. So they show you that inverse exists. This is a symbol for inverse, and I think they get down to telling you how to determine if you have an inverse. So you want to check that a function is one-to-one, meaning it passes the vertical line and the horizontal line test. So horizontal if it's a function, vertical line test if it's a function, horizontal would be a one-to-one function. So it has to pass both of those. And then if you have a one-to-one, you can go over the existence of that inverse, and it basically tells you you're going to solve for x instead of solving for y, or you can switch x and y and solve for y, but the notation is f of -1. And that's not a negative exponent, so don't confuse those when we're dealing with inverses. So again, does an inverse exist? The function has to be one-to-one, and then here's the procedure on how to find it. And you got some good description here. And again, here they're saying interchange x and y, so you have some function. You switch places with x and y, which they're showing you here, and then they're going through the solving process. So pretty good explanation here. And then going over graphing inverses, I think they tell you the relationship between inverses is the range and domain switch places. And then we have some logarithmic functions and definitions and properties here, as well as pictures of those graphs in general shapes. Again, some more properties of log. And then we have the change of base property here listed as well. So change of base looks like this, but if we need to see it in class, I can definitely go over what that is. But it's just using properties of exponents to interchange and rewrite exponential into a log. Alright, so that pretty much covers what you look at in 1.3 and then 1.4, trig functions and their inverses. So they first go over radian measures. Remember, we're going to be measuring in degrees and pi units, which are referred to as radians. Okay, you have your standard position, your basic 6 trig functions. And we have a unit circle that you definitely want to be familiar with. And then evaluating trig functions exactly, some trig identities, which they point out here. All trig functions can be written in terms of sine or cosine. And then you got the Pythagorean identity and half angle identities that we reference here. Some of the properties of trig functions, their periods, how long it takes them to go through a cycle, basically. Notice it's different with tangent and cotangent. Their period is a pi. Sine, cosine, secant, and cosecant are 2 pi. Got the graphs of sine and its reciprocal, which is cosecant. Same thing for cosine and secant. And then we have tangent and cotangent. And then you got to remember transformations of graphs. So they use A, B, C, and D to represent the phase shift and the translations. And then we go over some trigonometric inverses. But you got to remember that when you do the inverse, the domain and range flip-flop, and then you do have some different restrictions for that to be one-to-one, because a sine and cosine curve are not one-to-one. So in order to get an inverse, we have to restrict the domain and the range to one cycle so that we can actually do an inverse. So that's going to be one of the more important topics for sure, is making sure you remember the restrictions, domain and range for those inverses. All right, then you have some problems where they're solving it and giving some more properties. Right angle relationships here and some other useful identities. And just again another table of other trig identities and their inverses if you're going to do the inverse and their restrictions as well. Some graphics of those. Alright, so with that, that's just a general overview of the things you want to be familiar with, or at least take some time and look up. And with that, we're going to jump into MyMathLab and begin the exercises.